This is David Greenberg, the Director of Charter School Authorizing with the Audubon Center of the Northwoods, here to share with you today our FY17 World's Best Workforce and Annual Report Template and Guidance. This is meant to serve to support your development of a quality annual report that meets statutory requirements and that helps you effectively inform the public and your school community about your school, your successes, and your opportunities for growth. The report also serves an important purpose for the Audubon Center as it's a way that we gather data on your school's performance, and it supports our evaluation and our work as an authorizer. And so again, this will help you meet statutory requirements, help us gather information, and provide information for your school community. As you'll recall perhaps from last year, the World's Best Workforce Report and the annual report template can be presented as one report. And so that's been updated in statute. So you don't have to do two reports, but one. You will also have to, of course, do the World's Best Workforce Summary Report that is due to the Department of Education by December 15th. This report is due by November 1st, and it's due to the Audubon Center by that time, submitted through Epicenter. And you should also submit that report to your school community, typically through your school website, and employees and parents by November 1st. Please know that your annual report must be approved by your board of directors. That's required by statute. And so you should plan to do that at your October meeting. We've got a few tips here for the report, and then I'm just going to walk through our template. So as we go through the template, you'll see that notes from us are in italics. You should definitely delete those italics as you create your final report. Remember, we are not the only audience for this report. This report is for your school community, parents, so watch out for jargon, make sure to spell out acronyms, all that stuff. Think about your contractual goals in terms of your academic performance. Tell a complete story about your school's academic performance. So you want to report directly on those contractual goals. Think about specific successes and challenges of this past year. Remember, this is a report on last school year, 2016-17. Use graphs and charts to support your information, to share your information, along with narrative. Have different learners who are reading, different types of learners who will, read this information, and different ways of sharing the information to appeal to a variety of stakeholders. As I said, focus on the performance for this past school year, but think about data trends as well. Include all the key information in the narrative. Stay away from appendices. Tell the story right there in the narrative. And if you do use an appendix, that should really supplement and not really tell the main story. Think about this report as something, again, for your community. Visuals, photos are really helpful. We suggest a length of 30 to 60 pages. Long enough to tell your story, but not long enough not too long that people don't want to read it. And please do not provide personal performance information for staff or students. We want general information overall. I'm not going to walk through this fully, but here's all the statutory information that really forms the basis for our guidelines and this template. So that's the statute 124E 16 subdivision 2 outlines the requirements for this report. Additionally, 124E subdivision 7 provides additional requirements as it relates to board members and board training. Subdivision 124E12 subdivision 2 talks about the professional development of non-licensed school administrators. And then 120B11 talks about the World's Best Workforce Annual Report. So please read through this and know that this is the basis for our template and our guidance. And you can find more information on MDE about this World's Best Workforce. So here's our cover page. This Word document is meant for you to type right into if you so desire. Of course, you do not have to use this template. A number of schools have their own formats that they use, and that is great. You still need to meet, of course, all the requirements for the report, but feel free to use this template or feel free to use your own. Encourage you to, create a compelling cover page with images of your school logo. Encourage you not to use the same picture you used last year. Ideally, should look like a new report this year. Name of your school, district number, etc. Table of contents, certainly helpful to the reader. Again, you can use this or use your own. We've put page X here. Please be sure to update the pages. We have received annual reports and seen annual reports in the past that just say page X. Should say the page number that you can find these pieces on. So these are the main buckets of the main headings of all the information, again, that will meet the statutory requirements. School information, basic information, contact information, grades served, year opened, your mission and vision. I would encourage you to put the mission and vision as articulated in your charter contract, which should be the same mission and vision that is found on your website. Authorizer information, this is required by statute. Here's an example of where we have this italicized information that is really information for you that you should delete, right, once you have your final report. We've provided some draft language here that you're welcome to use that speaks about the Audubon Center of the North Woods. We should probably actually have this say Audubon Center of the North Woods and not just ACNW, at least the first time. So this outlines our mission, our vision, some of the discussion of the environmental education, environmental literacy, and of course, here's our contact information. Please note, we've had people in the past who've had the wrong suite number, the wrong address. Please just use this information as we've presented it here. This next number 2 here, implementation of statutory purposes. This is required by statute. This is in your contract as well. Talk about how you implement the primary purpose of charter schools to improve all pupil learning and all student achievement. And then also what the additional purposes that are identified in your charter contract could be to provide additional learning opportunities to students, to provide innovative learning models, new ways of measuring and accountability. Look back to your contract and talk about how you're achieving those things. Point number 3, student enrollment and demographics. I encourage you to provide a brief narrative discussing the enrollment trends. What's happened over the course of the last, say, 3 years. Here's a chart. Something we should add here that is not, for those of you who it's relevant, you can also add preschool if you have it, or pre-kindergarten. And let's say you're just a preschool through 8th grade, would encourage you to get rid of the grades that you don't serve. So think about last year, 2 years ago, last year, and then an estimate for this year. By the time you complete this annual report, you should have a reasonably good estimate of what your enrollment is this year. As you do these enrollments, typically we encourage you to look at October 1. What was your enrollment on October 1 of 2015-16, October 1 of 2016, and then October 1 of 2017? And then also include your ADM over the course of the whole year. In terms of demographics, again, a narrative, encourage you to, provide some trend analysis for your reader. But we get into all the demographics here. We didn't add this, but MDE is now providing data on students who identify as 2 or more race and ethnicities. You could add that as well. Sorry, we didn't have that in here. Student attendance, attrition, and mobility. State law says you need to provide information on student attrition. They don't tell us exactly what that means. So we've provided a few examples of that. But first, starting with student attendance, again, provide some narrative about the attendance rate. Consider thinking about how you think about attendance in your school. Most easy way to do that is to provide the overall attendance rate. Our overall attendance rate is 94%, for example. In some instances, if your school serves a highly at-risk population, particularly at the high school level, you can consider other ways of providing the data that is meaningful for your school. If your attendance hasn't met your expectations, talk about some strategies you're implementing to improve student attendance. In terms of student attrition, we've provided 3 examples here, or 3 or 4 different ways that you can tell the story. You could think about the percentage of students who were enrolled continuously between October 1 of 2015 to October 1 of 2016. Or the percentage of students who were enrolled in the school from the spring of 2016, so the end of the 2015-16 school year, to October of 2016, or the beginning of the 2016-17 school year. You can also look at student mobility. MDE provides that data at this link. How many transfers are you having? How many in? How many out? Etc. And then mobility index. There's data here that you can compare yourself to all the other schools in the state. This is also an interesting bit of data. What percent of your students were enrolled for 95% or more of the whole school year? In other words, they started at the beginning of the year and they stayed the entire year. So those are a few ways you can approach this. You don't have to do all 3 of those. You have to do at least one way that you're talking about student attrition or student mobility or student retention. If you have another way that you'd like to approach that's acceptable too. Section 5 here, this relates to World's Best Workforce in general and just an overall way to talk about your school to your school community and to your authorizer. So here's a number of questions and opportunity for you to provide a narrative about your approach to education and curriculum. What are your pedagogical approaches? How do you do special education? How do you serve English learners, etc.? It's a number of questions for you to ponder and respond to. Innovative practices and implementation. Again, a requirement. Charter schools, it's part of the additional purposes of charter schools, relates to that innovation. So talk about what are the innovative aspects of your program. I encourage you to think really innovatively. Having computers is not innovative. Every school probably in the state has computers and uses them. Now maybe you use those computers in a particularly innovative manner, but think about that. After school and summer programs aren't necessarily innovative, but it, many schools don't have those programs, and so it's an opportunity to just share some of the things you're doing. Preschool is somewhat innovative. It's relatively new for charter schools in particular. This is also a place for you to talk about some of your key successes of the past year and some of your challenges and your plan to address those challenges. You could also highlight your strategic plan in this section. Section 7, academic performance. This should be a really robust and comprehensive part of your report. Academic outcomes is one of the most important part of what you do as a school, obviously teaching and learning. For your school community and for us, we believe it's important that you report directly on your contractual goals. Your contractual academic goals are what you've really the promise you've made to the public and to your families, to your authorizer about the expectations that you're striving for. And so you should report on your performance against those expectations. Those have been aligned to World's Best Workforce, and you should, you can use these acronyms or these areas to show how the different areas of your goals align to the World's Best Workforce. It's required that you report on your progress on your World's Best Workforce goals. And so we really encourage you, we'll send it back to you if you need to align these. So be sure to include the World's Best Workforce goal areas. So how did the school do on its mission-related outcomes? You can copy your goal right in here and talk about the World's Best Workforce goal area that's addressed by that, and then how you've done on those areas. Provide the data and an analysis of how you've done. Provide some narrative. Every school should have a mission-related goal. English learners, some of you have that goal and some of you don't. So you can provide that. Here's some new things for 2017. Really, you won't have much data for this past year in terms of AMAO. You'll have that for previous years, and we've provided some, there's probably about six to 8 or 10 schools that would have this data. And so please include that data. If you have other data for FY17, access data or other data, please include that. Reading growth. You can, again, copy and paste your reading growth goals. Most importantly, in terms of reading growth, provide the data on the school's performance as it relates to local data. Audubon and others can access data on the MDE website related to growth, related to MCAs, but we do not have access, nor does the public have access to your local. Maybe you're using NWEA or STAR assessment or FastBridge. Provide that data here on reading growth. Similarly with math growth as it relates to your goal. Reading proficiency. For many of you, you have a number of indicators and measures as it relates to reading proficiency. We can gather that data. Others can see that data on the MDE website. You do not need to include all the different measures we have, all the comparisons, all the subgroups, but include some of the most important ones. Probably your overall performance. You may want to focus on a couple subgroups. You may want to focus on some comparisons. Again, you don't need to do all of them for reading proficiency as it relates to statewide data. Pick whichever measures are most important to you. If you have some goals that use data that is not state-related data, that again could be local NWEA data or other data, please provide that here. Same for math proficiency, same for science proficiency. Some of you might have a goal related to science growth, for example, using the NWEA. Please include that data here. Some of you have a goal related to proficiency and growth or growth in other curricular areas, such as writing. If you do, include that data here. Again, copy the goal, what's the World's Best Workforce alignment, and what are the measures and results for the goal. Provide the data and an analysis. If you don't have a goal in this area, you can just erase it. Post-secondary readiness, of course, for high schools, you will all have this. Elementary schools, you can, and middle schools, you can just erase it. But for the high schools, you'll want to provide the data on the key goals and measures that you have. Many of you will have graduation goals, credit attainment goals, perhaps participation in PSEO, or other ACT types of goals. So please provide that data here. Attendance, your overall attendance rate. And then finally, state and federal accountability. Um, that's changed. With our move to ESSA, there's a lot less to report here. There's no MMR data. So we encourage you, you'll be getting a world's best workforce data profile from the state, and this is your opportunity to put that. So they want to see these 5 areas: 3rd grade reading, 8th grade math, teacher equity data, achievement gap data, and graduation rates. So you should get that summary from the state, your world's best workforce summary data, which you should provide here so that the public has easy access to that. You have the opportunity to provide any additional academic data that you believe is important. So if you've got other stuff to provide it. If you don't have anything additional to provide, then you don't have to. This next section, 8, educational effectiveness, assessment and evaluation. A number of questions here that align to, again, world's best workforce. How are you evaluating the effectiveness of your education program? How are you integrating high quality instruction, rigorous curriculum, professional development, etc.? So this is where you would talk about some of your strategies and approaches for evaluation and assessment. A number of prompts here for you to respond to. Student and parent satisfaction. Encourage you to include a narrative here and data that talks about student and parent satisfaction. How are you gathering that data? What is that data and how are you using it? Oftentimes we might see something that says 75% of parents say they're satisfied, or 95% of parents like the school. It's really important that you say what percentage of the parents responded. Maybe you have a school with 300 students and only 20 parents responded. The value of that data relates to how many responses you're getting, and not only the satisfaction level. We're hopeful that some of you are also getting student satisfaction data and that you would include that here. Section 10, environmental education. This area of your report should provide summary information regarding your environmental education program at the school. Again, this is central to your contract. We've provided some narrative here that you can leverage that talks about environmental education in broad terms, in terms of the Audubon Center of the North Woods and the unique requirements of the fact that we authorize your school. And then encourage you down here to describe your approach to environmental education. You do not need to report on your goals here. The school has responded to an environmental education survey where you respond specifically to your goals for Audubon. And in terms of this report, again, this should be an overall summary for your community. Talk about your successes and challenges, talk about your approach, but you do not need to respond directly to your goals here. Governance and management. This includes board training and the administrator professional development report. First, you need a narrative. You need information about your board of directors. Who are the members? What are the board's positions? Their affiliation? Are they a parent, teacher, community member, a school leader who would be ex officio? The date that they were elected and seated, the term end date, and contact information. This should be any member who served on the board of directors during the 2016-2017 school year. We encourage you to provide a narrative about the work of the board and how the board of directors approaches its role. Board training and development. What is the board's approach to board training and development? So of course it's required by statute, but you also can talk more broadly about your approach. So we want to see information, we and the public, it's required, want to see information on the training, the initial training that board members engaged in, whenever it was. Maybe they've been on the board for 5 years and they did that training 4 years ago or 5 years ago. Provide that information. Here we have a chart for 5 members. If you have additional members, add rows and add names. So not only, of course, the initial training, but then annual training. Statute requires that board members participate in annual training, ongoing training, every year. So again, each board member, the date of the training, the title or topic of the training, and who did the training. For each board member, as you can see here, board member one, there could be multiple trainings for each board member. Here's a different way that you could present that annual training. Maybe you had 3 or 4 trainings throughout the course of the year, and here's all the board members, and you can indicate whether or not they attended. Here's the title, the topic, the presenter, and the date. So 2 options for ways that you can present that. You don't have to do both, of course. Management, provide a brief narrative about your management and how you approach that. Particularly if you have administrative staff who are not licensed, you must provide, here's the statute right here, you must provide the professional development activities that this individual completed during the 2016-17 school year. So this is anyone who serves in administrative, supervisory, or instructional leadership position. So you may have a licensed principal in your school, but you may have others who are in supervisory roles, instructional leadership roles, that need to complete this, and you need to provide this information for them. Again, this is not only the plan, but what they actually did to fulfill the plan. So you can provide the list of the administrators and their qualifications. Here's the professional development plan for that individual. And here's an example, their goals, and this is what they actually did in 2016-17. You could also have the plan for the coming school year. That's required of, again, each individual who serves in a supervisory, administrative, or instructional leadership role. Section 12, staffing. Opportunity to provide a narrative that provides your approach to staffing at the school. And here's a couple staff tables that you could use. For licensed staff, the name, file folder number, the license and assignment, the subject and grades that they are actually teaching, and then their status for 2018, 17-18. So returning or not returning. And then some comments. If this is a community expert, for example, or if they have some sort of permission, or any comments that you'd like to make regarding this person. You could say not returning, moved to Thailand, or so-and-so is on a community expert waiver, or whatever you want to include there. But provide information if there's something unique. Provide the professional development activities that teachers engaged in broadly. Overall, what was the professional development that you provided to your teaching staff during the 2016-17 school year? Teacher retention. Provide a brief narrative regarding teacher retention. What happened from last school year, 2016-17, to 2017-18? What percentage of those teachers returned? And then other licensed staff. This could be like social workers, could be principals, counselors, who are the other licensed staff, their assignments, and again, same thing, 2017 status and comments. Then we have here non-licensed staff. Most of you will certainly have more, just add rows. This will be your paraprofessionals, some of your administrators, your office staff. You may be the director of a school, then you're not licensed, and you would go here as well. We also ask for current year. So for this current coming school year, 2017-18, please provide your current licensed staff, your current non-licensed staff, your other licensed staff too. Section 13, operational performance. Provide a narrative of how things are going in terms of operations, health and safety, transportation, facilities. Again, imagine someone is just trying to learn about your school. Tell them a little bit about how you approach all these things. Highlight how you do background checks for staff, board, and volunteers. Finances. Now remember, no one would expect that you'll have your FY17 audit completed. This is a place to provide some broad brush strokes about your financial performance for the 2016-17 school year. So you want to provide the contact information for your financial, for anyone who wants more information about finances at your school, who should they contact? Could be your school director, could be your board treasurer, could be your financial service provider. If you have a financial service provider, you should say so. XYZ financial service provider provides services for the school. Here's a sample paragraph. Information presented below is derived from preliminary audit figures. You might not have your audit complete by October. Full financial audit will be completed and presented to MDE and Audubon no later than December 31st. Other folks can ask you for it if they want it. So here's just an overall chart, really broad. Your total revenue for Fund 1, your total expenditures. We're actually going to call this a net surplus or deficit. And for each fund, your general fund, your food service fund, and a community service fund if you have such funds. And then your total fund balance. Provide a little overview of your financial situation, challenges, a brief narrative about your revenues. Maybe you got some big grants, anything else that you think is important. Similarly, a brief narrative about your expenses, any large costs, any changes. A brief discussion about your net surplus or deficit and your current fund balance. World's Best Workforce requires that you provide an annual budget for the World's Best Workforce and a brief narrative on your allocation towards that. Many schools approach that to say our entire budget is focused on the World's Best Workforce. You can look back to the World's Best Workforce links provided earlier for more guidance on that area. And then finally, the last area is your future plans. Provide a brief narrative on key strategic areas for the school moving forward. Any plans for expansion, facility changes, program changes, technology, staffing, whatever it may be. Encourage you to look back to last year's plan or annual report and ensure that you're not saying the same thing this year as you said last year. And that would go for the entire report. Really strongly encourage you to leverage the language from previous reports, but it should look and feel like a report, a different report. You're reporting on a different year, different things happened. But again, for this future plans, talk about where you're headed in the future. So I'm going to pull up one other thing that I want to talk through. And that is some of the trends that we saw in the previous year. We see that some schools, we got 34 reports last year, very mixed quality. Some met all the compliance requirements and had a great report. Others did not. And so here's where some of the greatest areas of challenge that we saw. The professional development plan for any individuals who did not hold a valid administrative license and who serve in those administrative, supervisory, or instructional leadership positions. Again, you must include a description of the professional development activities completed by that individual, and you must include all of those individuals. You also need to provide the professional development activities for schools' licensed staff. So we talked about that earlier in the template. Board training. You must include that board training completed by each board member. And if a board member didn't engage in any training, indicate as much. The board must approve the annual report prior to submission to ACNW and the school community. It's due by November 1st, so plan completion of the report and board approval for October. And again, you must distribute this to the school community by November 1st. Implementation of the statutory purposes. Some schools didn't report on that. We talked about that in the template. Implementation of EE. Again, you just need to provide that overarching overview of the program and how you implemented it. World's Best Workforce. Ensuring that those goal areas in your report on academics aligns to World's Best Workforce. Also be sure to report on parent and student satisfaction. That's required. Finally, current year staffing. We want to make sure you include this year's staffing as well as last year's. A few more things for you to think about. Again, this is a report for your school community. It's not only for Audubon. We're just one of your stakeholders. So think about how this is a report for those other stakeholders and how maybe you can use this as a report for funders or maybe a different version of it for funders. Make sure you're using the template for the appropriate year. We had folks using previous year's templates and then you missed a few things if you're using the template. Repeating exact language from previous year's reports. I mentioned this earlier. You want this to feel like a new report for a new year. Leverage previous year's reports, but make it feel new. Use new photos, you use new language. And then it's really helpful if you submit the report and upload it to your website as a PDF, as a converted PDF. When you scan it, you print it and then scan it, you lose all kinds of quality. Oftentimes it's not in color, and we can't use it as a searchable document. So encourage you to take your final Word document and convert it to a PDF through some Adobe product or a free online converter. So that is all of our feedback and input and guidance. We encourage you to reach out to us if you have questions, as always, and we look forward to reading your annual reports. Thank you so much.